Greetings, my name is Kerry and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a book haul for you. I supposedly am not meant to be buying books, but I don't think I'm the only one that has been finding this whole global pandemic situation slightly anxiety inducing. One of my responses to anxiety is to buy books. So I have been buying a few books. So this book haul is from March to May. So we're now on the 25th of May, not quite at the end of May. I think I'm at a point now where I don't feel the need to buy more books, but I said that at the end of April and then bought more in May. So we'll see how that goes. But it has been a couple of weeks now since I bought any books. But for now we're just going to talk about the books that I have actually bought in the 3 months from the beginning of March to the end of May. Some of these I have already read, which helps, and some of them I am in the process of reading, and some of them I will read at some point. So I'm going to start with the ones that I've already read, because I've already talked about them, I think, mostly in videos as well. And then we're just going to go through them. I've kind of put them into categories, but we'll see how we get on. First were two books that were recommended by people at work that I have already read. So one is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. I read this in April, and it was, I think I put it as my favourite book in April. It's a picture book with some really inspirational quotes. A lovely story about the journey of a boy and his friends, the mole, the fox and the horse. Really, really lovely book. I've already talked about it quite a lot, so I'm not going to go into too much detail today. And then the other one is The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. I finished this at the beginning of May. This is non-fiction. Brené Brown, if you haven't heard of her, go and check out her TED Talks. She is a really inspirational speaker and writer, researcher into the subject of shame and vulnerability. And this book is along those themes. It is about how to accept yourself and be more vulnerable with people, and so build connections, and I really, really loved it. But I've talked about it quite in detail in one of my recent reads videos, so go and check that out if you would like to know a bit more of my thoughts about that book. And then this one I've just talked about in a recent reads video. This is it's a graphic novel written by Yumi Yamamoto, who is a booktuber, and the art is by Danni. I bought this really because Yumi wrote it. I don't generally read graphic novels, but I wanted to support her, and so I pre-ordered this, and it came in April, and I read it a couple of days ago and really enjoyed it. Again, I've talked about it in a recent reads video. And then I bought two books that I have read before a while ago. One of them is because I really wanted a nice copy, and the other one is just because I want to reread these books. So the one I want to reread is In the Hands of the Goddess by Tamara Pierce. So this is the second book in the Alana Quartet, which is the first series in the Tortal universe. I'm hoping to start my reread of this series soon, but one day I just needed a boost, and so I thought I'd buy this. It was fairly cheap to get this copy. I just love these. I think these were originally published in the 90s, or even in the 80s. It's just this really ridiculous cover. This is young adult, early teenage years. That was when I first read these books. So I'm looking forward to getting back into the series. And then the other one, I had a voucher for the Ninja Book Box shop, their pre-loved indie books, and I needed a third book to pick up, and then I saw that they had Folio Society edition of The Warden by Anthony Trollope. So this is a book that I did own in a fairly standard paperback, but I love the Folio Society editions, and so I thought I would treat myself to this, and I'm really glad I did. It's really beautiful. They come in these lovely slipcases as well, so I'm going to add that to my little burgeoning Folio Society collection. This is the first book in Trollope's Chronicles of Barsetshire, which I've started reading, not made a lot of progress with, but I'm really keen to try and make some progress with that series this year. But I now have the first book in a really lovely edition, which is really exciting. So the other two books that I got from that Ninja Book Box order were both ones I haven't read before. One of them was actually one of the few books that they were selling brand new on their website. So this is Cogheart by Peter Bunzl. This is the first in a middle grade series, I believe, and I've heard really good things about it. It's a book that Bex from Ninja Book Box really loves. So when I saw it on the shop and I had a voucher, I was like, I would just gotta get that. The third book that I got from that order is a Persephone book, and I really love Persephone books, so I'm trying to build up a bit of a collection of. The lights don't like these covers. So this is The Shuttle by Frances Hodgson Burnett. She is best known for writing children's books like The Secret Garden and A Little Princess, but she also wrote books books for adults as well. So this is the second of her adult books that I've owned, but I've not actually read either of them yet. This is in really good condition as well for a second-hand book, so really excited to have got that one. I'm not entirely sure what it's about, actually haven't looked, just recognised the author and the fact that it was Persephone and wanted to read it. So a couple more that are along a similar line. So we've got another book that I've already talked about, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. This was Half-Blood Blues, which came in the Ninja book box. It was the March box. I will link my unboxing video for this in the description box for you to go and check out, but this is a dual narrative historical mystery thriller type book set partly during the Second World War and follows Hieronymus Folk, who disappears mysteriously in the 1940s, and then 50 years later his friend Sid, who is trying to find out what happened to him. Looking forward to picking that up fairly soon, hopefully. Apparently it is quite dark, but they really loved it. And then the next book I bought for Ninja Book Club, because it was the book that was picked I think for April, but then the book club was put on hold. So I managed to get a copy before I knew it was on hold. I don't know when I'll get around to reading this, seeing as we're not actually talking about it, but I will at some point. This is called Die My Love by Ariana Harwicz. I think she is an Argentinian writer but lives in France, and I think the book is set in France, and it's about a slightly eccentric woman living in rural France. I think it is part of a series. I'm not sure when I'll get around to reading this because it's not a high priority. I only bought it because I thought we were talking about it for book club. And then I've got a couple of other books that I bought direct from indie publishers, and because indie publishers are struggling at the moment, sales of books have dropped because of bookshops not being open. If people are buying books, they're tending to buy them from places like Amazon, which don't always give a fair deal to the publishers or to the authors, particularly if they're indie publishers. I pre-ordered a couple of books direct from the publishers because I wanted to support the publishers, and so they are Saving Lucia by Anna Vaught. So we read an Anna Vaught book for book club a little while back and I really enjoyed it. This book sounds amazing. This is about 4 women who, I'm not quite sure how to explain it. So 4 women patients at a psychiatric hospital, but they all have actually really interesting stories, and it's about them and bringing their stories back to life. I think it's based on real people. Anna Vaught writes a lot influenced by her own experience of mental illness, so I know she'll handle it quite sensitively, but I'm really excited to read this because it sounds really interesting, and I don't think I've done it justice in that description, so hopefully I'll read it soon and I'll give you a better explanation of it. And then the other one I got was a press that I haven't come across before, but I saw a message from the author who was rightly concerned about the release of her new book. This is a publisher called Firefly Press, and when I heard the premise of the book I thought it sounded really interesting. The author is Eloise Williams and the book is called Wilde, and it is about a young girl who knows that she's different but just wants to fit in. She's just started at a new school and they're doing a school play about a witch, but then strange events start happening in the school and Wilde is trying to find out what is going on. What was really lovely is because I pre-ordered this, I did receive some little pre-order goodies. So the book has been signed and also has this lovely signed postcard with it as well. And then I got this cute little pin badge with it too. I don't know how well you can see that. It says I'm a witch. It sounds like a really lovely story. I think it's middle grade and I think the cover's beautiful and I just really like supporting indies. And this was a story that I thought sounded really fun, so hopefully I'll enjoy it and I'll let you know. I should have mentioned, I think already, 2 of the books that I'm currently reading are ones that I bought recently. So I'm quickly going to mention them now. One of them I've definitely talked about a lot. So one of them is Newburyport by Lucy Ellmann. This is again from an indie publisher. This is from Galley Beggar Press. The first part of my book diary for this is up already, so I'll link to that for you to go and check that out if you're interested. This is a really chunky book. It's taken me ages to get through it. It's going to take me a long time to finish it. It's told almost entirely as one sentence stream of consciousness, which is the main reason why it's really slow progress. I'm not going to talk any more about that because you'll have seen me talk about it loads already. And then the other book, I originally had this out from the library as an ebook, but I don't really enjoy reading ebooks and I was finding it really difficult to read it really because I don't really like ebooks. And then I saw it in the supermarket for like £4 or something, so I was like, well, I might as well just buy it because I knew that I wanted to have my own copy of it anyway. This is Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez. This is non-fiction about gender data bias and how when data leaves out the experience of women, decisions are made that negatively affect women. Really enjoying it, really making me think. A lot of the stuff she says is really common sense, but only common sense if you're a woman. And that's the problem. Women are often left out of the conversations, the decision making process, and so their needs are not considered, and that's the perspective that she is writing this book from. So really, really interesting, really enjoying that one. I'm going to quickly talk about the books that I have bought for Theology Book Club. One of these I've already read, one of them I'm about to start reading, and then the other ones are just ones that I was inspired to buy because of the book club. The one that we're going to be reading for the June book club, which I'm about to start, this is The Pastor as Public Theologian by Kevin Vanhoozer and Owen Strachan. I don't really know what it's about, but just we're going to be talking about it in June. The book we read for May is The Return of the Prodigal Son by Henri Nouwen. I have read this, I talked about it in a recent reads video, really, really loved it, and realised how much I love Henri Nouwen as a writer. So because of how much I loved this book, I ordered 2 more of his books. They were the 2 that were the cheapest on 8 books, because I don't have loads of money to be spending on books really, and they're both quite short, so I'm quite interested to read them. We've got Can You Drink the Cup, which is about the suffering of Jesus and what does that mean for Christians, and then the other one, which is called With Burning Hearts, which is about the Eucharist, which is also called the Lord's Supper or Communion, the Last Supper that Jesus celebrated with his disciples. So there's some really lovely illustrations in there. Really excited to get to that one. And then a book that my friend recommended, because I said I enjoyed Henri Nouwen's writing, she thought I'd enjoy this author. This is Richard Rohr. This book is called Falling Upward. I'm not entirely sure what it's about. I think it's to do with learning from difficult periods in our lives and how we can grow in faith through them. So that was all the ones that were to do with my Theology Book Club. I've got a couple here that are continuations of series that I'm working on. The first one is The Big Four by Agatha Christie. This, I believe, is the 5th book in the Poirot series. It's the next one that I didn't own. I haven't read the 4th book yet, but I'm hoping to carry on with this series soon, and I just needed a little bit of a boost one day, and I found this cheap on 8 books, so I thought I'd get that. The next one is actually the first book in a series that I owned the second book of. I was debating whether to bother with the series, but when I read the synopses of both the books, I thought if I could get this first one quite cheap, then I would read them. So this is The Keeper of Secrets by Judith Cutler. This is the first in I think it's a trilogy of detective novels. The central character is a priest called Tobias Campion, set in the early part of the 19th century. The concept sounded really intriguing, so I decided to give this one a go so that I can then read the next one as well, which I already owned. When I was making my series I Need to Finish video, I was talking about Watership Down and the sequel Tales from Watership Down by Richard Adams, and I thought to myself, why haven't I bought that yet? But again, I managed to find this quite cheap on 8 books. This is a collection of short stories featuring the characters that appeared in Watership Down, so I'm really looking forward to reading this and finishing off that series. Next, I have a slightly random collection of books that I just bought for the fun of it. So the first one is Tender as the Night by F. Scott Fitzgerald. So I started reading The Great Gatsby and was really enjoying it, and I have an omnibus edition of a lot of F. Scott Fitzgerald's novels, but I wanted to buy them in individual copies because I don't like big heavy bind up omnibus editions. I bought this edition because I wanted to get the Art Deco one to match my copy of The Great Gatsby, but unfortunately this one isn't in very good condition. It's quite damaged on the spine, and it should have, you can just make out there used to be nice silver writing on the front that's all worn off. So I'm a little bit disappointed about the condition of this book, and so maybe if I enjoy it I might buy a nicer condition copy, but still I would go for this Art Deco edition because I really like it, and I want to try and get the rest of his books in these editions because I think they're beautiful. Next, I bought a book which is the first in a series of retellings of biblical stories about the wives of King David. So this one is called Michael by Jill Eileen Smith. Now, David had about 10 wives and she's only written about probably the 3 most famous ones. And this book had quite a lot of negative reviews on Goodreads, but I was intrigued anyway. Michael is the character that I have a lot of admiration and affection for, but she is not treated very well, mostly when people talk about the story of King David. So I'm really interested to see how she's portrayed in this book. Likewise, if I enjoy this, or even if I don't, I might pick the other ones up in the series just to see how those characters are portrayed, because King David is a very flawed character but tends to be hero worshipped a lot by the church, so I am always trying to find more nuanced portrayals of him as a character, and that's something that I'm hoping to be writing about myself at some point in the future. The next book that I picked up I'm hoping to read very soon actually. This is the first book I bought on the recommendation of the Strong Sense of Place podcast, which I've talked about recently in my 5 faves podcast. This is Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel. This is a Mexican classic. It is about a young lady called Tita, and she, being the youngest in her family, she is forbidden from marrying because she has to look after her parents in their old age. Her love interest, the man she has fallen in love with, ends up marrying her sister so that he can stay close to her in her family, and it's about the fallout of that situation. There's also a lot of magical realism in this book. It's meant to be really, really good. I'm really excited to pick up. So going back to this idea of retellings, I also like fairy tale retellings. I recently heard about an author called Anne-Marie McLemore, who I believe is non-binary. I believe they've recently come out as non-binary. They write a lot of fairy tale retellings, so I am really intrigued to read a lot of their books because I really love fairy tale retellings. This was actually the one that I found cheapest on ebooks, because when I've not read an author before, I don't like to spend a lot of money on them until I know that I like them. So I just wanted to get a cheap secondhand copy, and this was also one that the concept sounded the most intriguing to me, so I'm going to read this one, and if I like it, I'll be buying more of their books. This was another book that I heard about from Twitter, so there was some Twitter drama recently about this author, Rin Chupeco, no fault of their own. Again, I believe this is a non-binary author, and they received a lot of flack for standing up for themselves when another author essentially defaced one of their books. Again, I had a look through the synopses of a lot of books that they've written, and I thought this one sounded really intriguing, really interesting, and I wanted to support them as an author, so this one I actually did buy new, and I also bought it from an independent bookstore just to make myself feel extra virtuous. I didn't realise it wasn't out in paperback at the time. I had intended to buy the paperback, but never mind, I'm intrigued enough by the story. I think it's the first one in the series as well, and I really am looking forward to reading this. Next, I bought a collection of poetry by an author that I really like. So this is I See a New City by Gerard Kelly. This is his second book of poetry. He has also written a number of non-fiction Christian books about Christian lifestyle and discipleship. I've also met him a couple of times. He and his wife run a charity that I used to work for, and so when I heard he had a new book coming out, I wanted to buy it straight away. I'm really excited. I'm going to be picking this up fairly soon when I have a slot available on my currently reading. Another book that I picked up because I heard about it on Twitter. So a lot of authors have been struggling recently to promote their books that have been released because of lockdown and bookshops being shut. So another author that was worried about their book release is Greg Jenner, who also does the You're Dead to Me podcast, which is one of my favourite podcasts, again talked about in my 5 Faith podcast video. This is his latest book called Dead Famous, which is a book about the growth of celebrity culture, but also looking back at it through history. So it says from Bronze Age to Silver Screen. I'm really intrigued to see what he says about some of the famous people from history. I think there's some overlap with some of the people that he talks about on his podcast, so really excited to read this one as well. Finally, for this section, this is the last book I bought for myself. The rest I've got to talk about were all bought for me. This was one I had it on pre-order because it's an author that I really love. So this is The Betrothed by Kira Cass. She wrote the Selection series, which were a book series that I really loved a couple of years ago. Always eagerly awaited the next instalment. So this is the first. I think it's going to be in a duology. A few people have read this already, and it has some quite mixed reviews. One of my friends has read it and she said she enjoyed it, but don't go into it thinking it's going to be like the Selection series, and I think that's why a number of people have maybe been disappointed with it. I'm not really sure what it's about. It's the first thing she's released for a while, so I'm quite intrigued to see her writing something other than Selection series. She also wrote a book, a Little Mermaid retelling called The Siren, which I also really liked. Intrigued to see what this one is like. Finally, onto the ones that people have bought for me. I'm going to start with a couple that were bought by a friend because I lent her some books and she spilt tea on them, so she bought me new editions. One of them she had to get secondhand because it's out of print, but she bought me replacement editions of the books that she spilled tea on. So that is In Memory of Her by Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza, which is a feminist theology book, and one that I found really helpful when I was writing my MA dissertation a couple of years ago. She also bought me a new copy of All Things Anglican by Marcus Roop, which is a book about what it means to be Anglican, basically. And she felt so bad that she had damaged my books that she insisted on buying me another book as well as a sorry present. So she bought me this book called Womanist Midrash by Wilde Gaffney. This is an exploration of a lot of characters, female characters from the Old Testament and how they're portrayed, which is a subject that I'm really interested in because that was what some of my MA dissertation was about. Really pleased that she bought this for me. It was one of my most wanted books, so really excited to read this. I have a number that I was bought from Twitter, Amazon gift list giveaway type things. So the first one I've already read. I've talked about this a little bit. This is Every Heart a Doorway by Shauna Maguire. This was bought for me by Justine from I Should Read That. I read this in April, I think it was, and I really loved it. I'm really grateful to have been given it, so thank you, Justine. Really enjoyed that one. This is about a boarding school for children that have come back from fantasy worlds and how they are trying to cope with readjusting to normal life. Really, really good. Next I was bought The Raven Tower by Anne Leckie. This was given to me by Ellie Warren, who is at Patchwork Bunny on Twitter. I've mentioned all of these before actually because I was hoping to try and get to them in May. Anne Leckie is an author that I really love. She wrote some sci-fi books that I really enjoyed. This is her first fantasy book. Really intrigued to see how she writes fantasy and to read more of her books. We then have Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. This was bought for me by Victoria from What Victoria Read. I've not read any of the Percy Jackson books before, and now they're being adapted for Disney Plus. I really need to get on and read some of these, so I'm really excited to have this one and to start on this series. And then I was bought Once Upon a River by Diane Satterfield. This was bought for me by Erica Davis Budgeon from Anonchi Reads. Diane Satterfield wrote a book called The 13th Tale, which I really loved. This was her new one that was on my radar recently. I've heard really, really good things about it as well. I'm not entirely sure what it's about. Something to do with a girl being brought out from the Thames and she supposedly has drowned, but then she comes back to life and all the fallout of what happens with that. I've heard really good things about it. Really excited to read it. And then finally, another book that I'm really, really excited to read, and I'm slightly cross at myself that I haven't started it yet. This is The Deep by Rivers Solomon. This was bought for me by Katie P. Boyle. Not managed to find her on Twitter to say thank you in person, so if you're watching this, Katie, thank you very much. Rivers Solomon is a non-binary author, wrote the excellent book An Unkindness of Ghosts, which I read a little while ago, and I've been looking forward to reading more of their work. It's about an undersea people that are descended from the children of pregnant slaves who were thrown overboard during the slave trade. The central character is called Yetu and she's the memory keeper for the people, and it's about her story and what happens to her. I haven't counted these, I'm not sure how many there are. I think in total actually it's around the 30 mark, so it's about 10 a month. It's more than I usually would be buying because I buy books when I'm stressed. I haven't bought any for a couple of weeks and I'm hoping to keep that down now, but these are all books I'm really excited about, so I'm looking forward to getting to read them all. But that's it. Let me know if you want to know more about any of these books. I will obviously be talking about them when I've read them all. Let me know if you've read any of them and what you thought of them, if there's any you think I should get to more quickly. Have a chat to me down in the comments about that, about any books that you've bought recently that you want to let me know about. Are you stress buying books as well? I hope I'm not the only one. I don't think I am. So yeah, have a chat to me down in the comments. You can also follow me on my social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram and on Goodreads, so you can see more about what books I'm buying and what books I'm reading on those places. You can also like this video if you liked it, and you can subscribe if you would like to see more content from me. You can also click the notification bell if you'd like to know every time I upload. But that's it for today, so thank you so much for watching and I will talk to you again soon. Bye!